要做官也不用等了，今天了，这个老实话。The same with me. Some of the people are supposed to Virginia is next chief executive. What would you be doing? Probably still go to Hong Kong 2 or 3 times a year. She need a friend who. 可是我那个批评他一不少，今天才打电话去给那个先学生，现在在念幼老师，我对我那个我说我不讲，可是我解15分钟什么不讲，给另外一个人。
So if you're ready, I'll introduce you.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. We are very honored to have a distinguished friend and colleague who's been kind enough to make a return visit to speak in our Taiwan Democracy Program. He is Professor Yun-han Chu, who's a distinguished research fellow of the Institute of Political Science at the Academia Sinica, and also Professor of Political Science at National Taiwan University, and also President of the Zhang Jingguo Foundation for International Scholarly Exchange. He's passing through California on his way to Toronto to the annual meeting of the Asian Studies Association, and so we are very fortunate to capture a bit of his time today. Professor Chu is well known not only in Taiwan but throughout Asia and the world for his work on political development in Taiwan, and for his leadership of the Asian Barometer, which is a comparative study based in Taiwan of attitudes and values toward democracy throughout Asia. He joined the faculty of National Taiwan University in 1987 after getting his PhD from the University of Minnesota. I got to know him not too long after that, when he served as Director of Programs at the Institute for National Policy Research during the decade of the 1990s. And he organized many meetings and conferences there, including one we collaborated on, which led to the edited book on consolidating third-wave democracies. He has written and edited many other books, including Crafting Democracy in Taiwan, China under Jiang Zemin, The New Chinese Leadership, and he's a 3-time recipient of the Outstanding Research Award from the National Science Council of Taiwan. His works have appeared in many leading journals, including, I'm proud to say, the one that I co-edit, the Journal of Democracy, as well as World Politics International Organization, China Quarterly, and Asian Survey. Before I give the floor over to him, I want to also take this opportunity, since it's the last seminar of this spring quarter, to thank the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in San Francisco for its continuing support of the Taiwan Democracy Program here at CDDRL. Li Fang Wang, it's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you for coming again. So today, Yun-han Chu is going to give us his reflections on Taiwan's 2012 election, I guess who won, why, what it means, all of that. So Yun-han, the floor is yours.
Okay. Before I get started with my talk, I just want to say, how pleased I am to be invited back to this campus. This is always my favorite, one of my favorite campus. Especially in the springtime. I do notice that I'm not the first speaker speaking on the January 2012 election. I knew for a fact that Alan Romberg came to this town a few weeks ago. And before that, Sherry Rieger and Eric Yu came to do the presentation right after the election. So it's very tough for me to try to say anything new. But maybe what I'm going to offer you today is more like by the time the dust settles, then we can have a more kind of a cool-headed assessment about the meaning and the significance of this very important election. So I would now sit down and try to manipulate my PowerPoint. But in the beginning, I just want to share a very interesting conversation I had last night with the driver on my way from the airport to the hotel. It's an open secret that if you are invited by Larry Diamond, then you will be offered a limo service from the Diamond limo service. I'm sure he doesn't have any commercial stake in the company. And the driver, have known me. He picked me up at the airport several times. So the first thing he said to me that, "You're from Taiwan, right?" Yes. I say, "Yes. You have a very good memory." And he said, "Your country just had the election. Is that right?" Oh, I said, "Oh, you noticed?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I have a couple of clients." Who went back to Taiwan for the election and came back, okay, using his service, basically, obviously. And he said, it seems that some people are quite happy with the outcome, but others, were not, okay. And I tried to be kind of evasive, at this point. I say, well, in a democracy, usually the outcome can only, make half the population happy, right?
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. And then he said, speaking of outcome, is that good for Taiwan? Well, I say, I paused for a few seconds. He pressured me to show my true color, right? Well, I say, as a scholar, I do believe that the outcome will enhance peace and prosperity of Taiwan, and that's pretty much the gist of my talk today.
Okay.
But I will, provide you obviously more detail. Let me first locate Taiwan's general election in the larger context. I believe that this year for East Asia this is a very eventful and critical year of leadership transition. Virtually all relevant players in the region have just entered or were soon to be at sensitive political juncture. We already witnessed the power succession in Pyongyang, and then Vladimir Putin, they have just sort of succeeded in, getting back his presidential seat in March. And then we are going to have the transition from Hu Jintao to Xi Jinping at the CCP's 18th Party Congress, due in late September, and followed by Obama's re-election bid in November. And this year would end with the presidential contest in South Korea in December. And I believe that the outcome of all these crucial events carry enormous implications for the region's stability and prosperity. And Taiwan's joint presidential and parliamentary election on January 14 was no exception. And why so much was at stake? Let's first, speaking from the perspective of Washington. I think for Obama administration, it has really a keen interest, in waiting out for the outcome of this election. Sustaining peace and stability across trade is especially important for the United States because it has its hands full dealing with friction with Beijing over a range of political, economic, and security issues. Moreover, I will argue that no incumbent U.S. president seeking a second term will welcome another burning issue on its plate during an election year. And what really worries policymakers in Washington has a lot to do with the September trip by Chair Lady Tsai Ing-wen to Washington. I believe that during that trip, she failed to convince U.S. policymakers that DPP had a viable formula to engage Beijing and prevent a major rupture in cross-strait relations, provided that the DPP returned to power. I think Beijing probably had an even greater stake in this race. I think it was widely perceived by a lot of observers that this election was a litmus test for the political viability of Hu Jintao's pragmatic approach to the so-called Taiwan issue. This approach has placed emphasis on peace and development instead of peace reunification, and apply more carrots than sticks. However, a return to DPP rule could have emboldened the hawkish voice within the CCP to scrutinize Hu's policy and push for a tougher approach. And also, a lot of observers worry that Ma's defeat could have suggested that the majority of Taiwan's electorate rejects the center pillar on which Beijing has based its willingness to engage with Taipei, the so-called 1992 consensus on One China. So this is, how I characterize the importance of this election. At the same time, I also think this election is also a very important milestone as far as Taiwan's democratic consolidation is concerned. I think Taiwan's young democracy had just walked past another important milestone. The January presidential election is the fifth popular election for the highest executive office of Taiwan since the country completed its democratic transition in 1996. And the concurrent parliamentary election is the seventh election of the national legislature since the introduction of popular re-election in LY in 1992. So increasingly, competitive electoral election and power rotation have become normalized. At the same time, partisanship has become steadily crystallized. I think another important sign that we are entering into a normalization of electoral context, democratic context, is the fact that this is the only national election in the recent past that Larry Diamond didn't make the field trip to Taiwan to observe the election. I think that's another indicator that politics on Taiwan have become normalized.
It wasn't because I didn't care.
No shooting. And also, a lot of survey data have shown that you see a steady recovery of the citizens' confidence in the democratic system, which unfortunately has suffered a setback due to the protracted political gridlock and the escalation of conflict over national identity during 2000 and 2008. But that setback, has been pretty much compensated during the recent rise in terms of citizen confidence of Taiwan young democracy. And I think a very interesting indicator about this, what I call the routinization or normalization of electoral politics, is that the turnout rate has entered into a long-term declining trend. Despite the fact that this race has been predicted as a very, very tight race, as fiercely